Good morning, guys. It is a chilly day here on the homestead. It is about 40 degrees outside, even though it's probably about 9:30. It's still really cold. It froze again last night. I'm outside in the garden because if you've been following along, you know that I am trying to get my soil ready for next season. So in order to do that, I grow here in coastal South Carolina, zone 8B, and we can start putting brassicas in the ground in February. We can start planting onions. Pretty soon my onions are coming in January from Dixondale Farms, and usually I plant them in December. For the past 2 years I planted them in December, but this time I decided to wait, and I'm so glad I decided to wait because I soil test after I would have had my onions in the ground already. So now this just gives me a little bit more time to work on the soil. One of the things that once I soil tested, which I highly recommend if you never soil test to do it, it's super easy. I did a video showing you how I soil test my soil, and I always was afraid to do it. I thought it was super hard, super difficult. And it was really simple. Just added some scoops of soil inside a Ziploc bag. It did say that to let it dry out, and so I didn't close the Ziploc bag for 24 hours to let it kind of dry out and air out, and then I zipped it up and sent it to my local agriculture office, which was Clemson, and I just mailed a check in there with, I had printed out like a label that said what kind of soil testing I wanted, and each bag cost $6, and I soil sampled 3 different areas of my garden. You can watch that video if you have been scared to soil test. I highly recommend it. It showed that I had my pH was 7 and a 7.1 in some areas, which is very neutral, but a lot of plants that I grow prefer a slightly more acidic soil. So I just want to lower my soil just a little bit down to probably about the 6 or the 6.5 range. It would be ideal for me. So to do that, I brought this pH down. It has really good reviews on Amazon with people saying that they use this either in hydroponics or in their soil, and it really works to lower their pH. So I'm going to try it, but in order to do that and see if it was getting any results, I went ahead and picked up one of these. These are like a 4-in-1 probe, and it tests the moisture, the pH, the fertility, and the light. I didn't really need it for the fertility and the light, but I wanted it for the pH mostly to see if it worked for that. And I'm going to stick it in some places that I know that I tested the beds, which would be this bed right here and this in-ground bed. I know I took soil samples from those as well as some beds over on that side and combined those together, and that soil test was a 7.1. So I'm going to stick this in the ground and see if this gets anywhere near 7.0. That will be my test to see if this works or not. So this right here is a bed that I tested. I tested it when it was much lower, but I added in this compost at the top, and I know when I tested straight this compost that it was an 8.0. So I'm not going to stick it in super far, and I'm going to change it to pH. And right now it's actually at an 8, which makes sense because that's soil, like I said, the compost. Let me bring you in and see if you can see. So if you can see, this moves, so that's the moisture level, and you would look for the moisture and it would say it's changing. It is bringing up to dry, moist, or wet. But if I want to change it to pH, I bring it over 1. And you can see it's staying on the 8. And like I said, I tested this compost and it was at an 8. So I would say that this does work pretty well. Let me try in a different area. So when I go further down in a different area, it does move slightly closer to the 7, but I would say that this is a good indication that this soil meter does work. So the instructions on this bottle are pretty vague. It just says Even online, it just said add like 1 milliliter, which 1 milliliter is such a minute amount. And so I ended up adding in, and they said add it into 1 gallon of water. So 1 milliliter to 1 gallon of water until you get the desired pH that you're looking for. I added in a teaspoon, which was 5 milliliters, into a gallon of water here. And I'm going to basically pour a gallon of water on each bed. So I'm going to have to do this a bunch of times because I have 15 3 by 15 beds, and then in all of my metal raised beds, this in-ground bed, I'm just going to be adding a gallon of water, and then take the soil pH again and see if it showed any significant difference. The reason why I'm adding in a 5 milliliter, which is a teaspoon, is because when I was reading reviews, a lot of people said that it took about 5 to 8 milliliters of the product in order to lower their pH. So we're gonna go ahead and pour this on the first bed. Another way that I can lower the pH of the soil is by adding peat moss. I do have a bag of peat moss. Is not a lot of peat moss, is not like enough to do more than probably 2 beds. But the guy, when I called Clemson, was asking him about my soil test results, was saying that I can dig out some of my soil and then replace it with peat moss, and or even what is it called? Not topsoil, but fill dirt, and replace it to lower the pH, and just like try and manage those I had a high phosphorus and a high potassium levels. And he said by taking some out of the compost or the soil that's in this bed and by replacing it with something neutral like either fill dirt or peat moss, that can kind of bring down my levels drastically. And right now I'm just working on lowering my pH. Another thing that he said I can do is by adding blood meal. So I have garlic planted in this bed. I actually did not plant that garlic. That's garlic that resprouted in here from last year. But I am going to go ahead and add a cup of blood meal to this whole bed. This is I guess a 1 square foot by 40 square foot bed, maybe like a 1.5 by 40. And my garlic, I showed in a previous video, is looking like it's starving for some nutrients. One of the things by having high potassium and high phosphorus is that it gives the plants a hard time to take up nutrients like calcium, boron, sulfur, magnesium. Even if there's high amounts in your soil, it just gives it won't be able to uptake those nutrients. I did have quite a bit of nutrients like the iron, the zinc, the sulfur, not sulfur, the iron, zinc, magnesium, calcium in my soil. But since I have such excessive amounts of potassium and phosphorus, that will show why it's not able to uptake those nutrients. I order a calcium, magnesium, it's like a zinc spray, and I'm going to use that as a foliar spray, so that since the plant's roots aren't able to get in those nutrients, even though they're in the soil, I can do a foliar spray, and hopefully that can also help with the growth of my garlic, because since it's planted here, I do want it to grow and produce, good garlic bulbs. And since while I'm working on my soil, in the meantime, I can get that foliar spray and feed my soil or my plants that way. The instructions on the side of this container tells you if it's in the grow phase, if it's in the bloom phase, or if you're putting it in a sprayer. I put mine in a sprayer, and so I did add in 20 milliliters, about 4 teaspoons. I would say I added somewhere between 4 and definitely less than, it says 20 to 40 milliliters. I did add somewhere between 4, but definitely less than 8 teaspoons in my gallon sprayer. And then it also says that you can do it 1 to 2 times a week. That was my first round. I am going to come out here tomorrow and then spray those garlic again and see if I could get them greening up, because like I said, I added already the fish emulsion. I just added the blood meal, and then now I did the foliar spray. I'm going to do the foliar spray again tomorrow and see if I notice any changes. I had to grab the water hose from inside of the hoop house, so I figured while I was in here I would go ahead and water these beds. I did go ahead and sprinkle some blood meal right on top of these beds. We have leaves. I didn't like move the soil or anything. We have leaves covering all of the beds inside of the hoop house, and I figured that the blood meal would just be a slow release fertilizer once it gets through all of the leaves. Reason being is I didn't scratch away the soils because I had already fed these about a week ago with some fish emulsifier, which, if you're not familiar, fish emulsifier has high nitrogen in it. So I'm not worried about the blood meal just sitting on top and being a slower fertilizer. Since I'm in here, I am going to go ahead and add this foliar spray to these plants as well. Okay, we made it back to where we started from. I got my soil meter back out again, and I am going to take the meter, the testing, I guess, the meter of this soil, the same soil that we tested at the beginning of this video, which, like I said, when I first tested it, it was much lower, and then I added straight compost on top, and I know that the straight compost, the pH was at 8, and below it was a 7.1 or 7.0, because we did take that pH when we sent it off to Clemson. So I'm going to use this again and see if that soil acidifier did anything. So right now I have it stuck in as low as possible, and it's saying the pH is a 6. So this time I put it in about halfway. I'm at the corner, which I guess I didn't put a lot of liquid over here, and it's a little above the 6. Another place it's a little below the 7. So as you can see, just from a little soil pH meter thing, it does look like the soil, the pH down did work. The real testing time will be if I soil test in about a month or 2 before I plant out, if that really affected long-term my pH, or if that's just something that affects it, you know, while the soil's wet and then it, you know, washes away. I have no idea. But we shall see together when we soil test again and find out if I was able to fix my soil before planting time next year, meaning dropping the phosphorus and potassium and adding and dropping my pH a little lower than it's right now at 7 and 7.1. I just wanted probably about a 6.5. And so when we soil test again, I should be able to get a really good guesstimate. When I soil test again this time, I am going to add in the hoop house beds, and I am going to add in these metal raised beds, because I explained it, I'm going to explain again, is that I did add slightly different soil in these beds. In these beds, I did add a lot of leaves at the bottom with a lot of wood, and then I added compost, and I even added bag soil. And so I was remembering wrong and thinking I just used compost and knew that it would probably be about the same as my wood inside raised beds. But when I thought back to it, I'm like, no, I added that leaves and that wood and stuff like that, and that breaks down and can change the like leaf mulch and all of that can change the pH of your soil. And so this soil could possibly have a different and not be struggling with phosphorus and potassium, but I don't know. We shall all find out together. Thank you guys for hanging out with me while we tested that pH meter or that soil meter. I think it worked. I'm gonna have a link down in the description box to the things that I used in this video. If you're struggling with your soil pH or nutrients, then I'll have a link to all the things I use. So I'll see you guys next time.